Well, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you all for coming. My name is Rob Cheney. I'm the local government reporter for the Missoulian, and this is our time to interview and discuss a lot of the issues that are important to Missoula County voters with our two candidates for Missoula County Commission. In the blue jacket and blue shirt is Bill Carey, the Democratic candidate, and in the blue jacket and blue shirt, closer to me, is the Republican candidate, Jerry Ballas. This is not a debate. That is, this is not set up for these two gentlemen to contest with each other. They may get to contest with me a bit because it is my aim to run through a series of issues that voters have asked the newspaper to find out where these candidates stand. And what I intend to do is, as close as possible, find out where they're going to vote, or at least where their tendencies are going to lie as specifically as possible on as many issues as we can cover in about the next hour, hour and a half. To that end, I'm going to be pressing them to give me specific answers or specific examples or specific ways that they intend to handle problems. We're not here to discuss what the problems have been or might be, but what they are going to do about them if and when they are elected to that office. As we get through the main list, which we published in the Missoulian on September 6th, some of you may have seen it, and wind down, we will then open it to the audience for any questions that you might have. And I would advise you, if there's something on your mind, please try to formulate it down to a simple question of what do you plan to do about, or how would you vote on, and enter the blank question mark. This is not a time for us to be stating our opinions. It's the time for these gentlemen who have put their names and their money and their time on the line to be our representatives to tell us what they think. That being the case, we're going to get started here. My questions are developed from a variety of meetings with social organizations, civic clubs, people on the street calling me up, and an open-ended telephone poll the Missoulian conducted of the four major counties in western Montana, simply asking what are the issues that these gentlemen should be discussing. And the number one issue that came out across the board in all four counties was planning, zoning, and land use. Now, that's a very broad topic, but I'm sure you too have been either having personal interest in there or been hearing things on the doors that give you some ideas about where your priorities will be there. Start alphabetically, Mr. Ballas.
Planning and land uses and zoning. I think that really relates to the growth management plan and the comprehensive plan that has been passed by both the city and county to date, but has not really been published since nobody really has a firm copy of it. I believe we do need good plans to help us govern and direct the growth of both the county and the city and how we're going to interface. I've been involved in planning all my life. I think the one issue that I've heard as I've gone out is that there are a number of people that feel they still have a right or feel that they want to exercise their right to vote on the comprehensive plan, from primarily the aspect that in order for it to really be successful, the feeling is that it needs to have a wide range of consensus and try to eliminate as much contention as we can as we implement the growth management plan.
You have looked at the plan, I assume.
I've looked at a draft of the plan. I have not seen a final copy of the plan.
What areas have you found in it that either need reworking, or have you found the majority of it to be satisfactory to your planning instincts?
The majority of it, I think, is satisfactory. The part that I don't think anybody can really evaluate is how the whole plan reads after you put all the amendments and addendums together at the last meeting. I asked for a final copy of that plan very early on so I could read the whole plan and to see how it goes together. And until you can do that, I don't think you can really respond to the plan. And to my knowledge, it has not been completely published or put out to the public in its final form.
The counter-argument to that is that it's been in the works for 5 years, and the meetings have all been open to anybody who wanted to participate. Those folks who did want to get up to speed did, and they, in public hearings, made their comments and saw changes happen. Is that not sufficient?
I don't believe it's sufficient for the county as whole, and as big as the county is. There were changes that were made at the very last minute in the last meetings, and it was adopted. And until somebody can read the plan as a whole and understand it and know how you're going to have to work and implement that plan, I don't think you can completely comment on it.
Okay. We take that as a specific issue. Mr. Carey?
Well, I believe the city council unanimously approved the plan. Is that not correct?
Yes.
I mean, I think we ought to get on with it. The plan has been in a very public process. We've got a good, solid basis now for moving ahead, so I think we just need to get on with it.
What parts of the plan do you see needing revisiting, if any? Is there specific parts that you think desperately need to be activated?
Well, like Mr. Ballas, I've just seen the draft of it, but I think Chapter 6 is the heart of the plan, and I think that's where the incentives for good growth are. So, you know, it's a very technical document in many ways, and I think it's been thoroughly reviewed, and I just think we ought to get moving. Growth isn't going to wait for us, you know.
Would you support a vote on it, or do you think that's a bad idea?
No, I think it's been through the necessary reviews. You know, there are times when this is a representative democracy, and I think representatives have the time, they develop the expertise, and this is an occasion, I think, where the representatives of the people, the public and private sector, have had a thorough look at it, and so I would say let's move forward.
As far as the zoning and subdivision rules that are going to be built out of this plan, those processes are going on right now. What parts of county government do you think particularly need improvement or strengthening, or perhaps even a diminished presence to manage growth in Missoula County?
I guess I would think probably the subdivision regulations are the most key. That is the most controversial issue that the county commissioners get involved with as they review subdivisions. And again, until that plan is really fully developed, I don't think it's possible to really comment on a plan that's in development. And
well, what parts of subdivision review are currently the rough edges that need to be fixed?
I have not been through the subdivision review process and sitting in with them. I don't think any of us have that complete time. I think we need to let the committee complete their work, and as county commissioners, then we need to take that to the public and review it.
You're not hearing from the doors or people saying, this is a sore spot, fix it?
I don't think anybody from the doors, the average public, really knows that much about it. Most of the work is being done in committees with a select few people that are interested in it, and the general population out there, citizens, really know very little about what's going on.
Mr. Carey?
Well, yeah, I agree that it is a very technical document, and I'm certainly not going to sort of pretend that I'm an expert in subdivision regulation. I will say, however, that I went up to Helena yesterday to a public policy forum sponsored by the Montana Building Industry Association and the Montana Association of Realtors, and what they're saying is, you know, let's be predictable and let's be fair. People need to pay their fair share. Builders and developers are willing to do that, but they need a plan to work on. They need predictability. They need to know that when they come in with a good plan, that it's not going to take months and months of review. They need to know what to expect, and they're willing to get on with it. I didn't hear anybody up in Helena, and this was a very well-attended session up there, lots of builders, realtors, and so on, and planners for that matter, saying, planning's in the public interest. Let's just have a predictable plan, let us know what we need to do, and we'll get on with it.
Do we have that in the works here in Missoula?
I think so. I think that's what the comprehensive plan's all about. Another thing that was said and generally agreed upon is that we don't want to do subdivision by subdivision by subdivision. That's not the way to go. What we need to have is a comprehensive plan, and that's what we're talking about here in Missoula, and that gives us the predictability to build on. So they want the ground rules to be fair and reasonable, and they'll build.
Could I respond to that?
Sure.
I think everybody wants the ground rules to be fair and reasonable, and the question is whether the local commissioners are going to accept that reasonability. And right now, a couple of the subdivision reviews that I've seen through, that developers have not been able to rely on predictability, and commissioners have gone in at the very last minute after people have spent months and months trying to develop plans, and those plans have been changed with people making last-minute decisions. As a commissioner, I would tend to try to establish those ground rules up front with the staff, rely on the staff and the county surveyor's office to provide that information so that commissioners aren't making last-minute decisions.
You've raised two interesting points here. First of all, the commissioners are always going to be making last-minute decisions because they're the last people to see subdivision review after it's gone through the staff planning process. Secondly, if the people aren't telling you they have specific concerns with the plan, how can they have specific concerns enough to vote on it?
They can have, well, I guess the basic problem right now is they haven't been able to see a plan. The plan isn't out there for the average citizen that wants to look at it, to review it, and to find out what it's in there. The plan is available to the people that have sat through the boards, but we found out in the past, since the issue at Fort Missoula, that our representatives don't always necessarily represent the wide range of the opinion of the public.
Which Fort Missoula?
Fort Missoula.
The housing development?
Housing development.
Park.
Where it was approved by a city council and then overturned because of concerns of the citizens. And that's the reason we have initiatives and several things on the ballots right now, because citizens want to take more responsibility for their government. They don't have the time to sit down on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis and attend a lot of meetings, so they do come up at the last minute. Once a plan is developed and they're given a chance to review it, then they have a chance to respond to it in an intelligent fashion.
Mr. Carey, if you are commissioner, going to be responsible for interpreting whatever plan gets in there and making those decisions. Can you flesh out a little bit more about your thoughts on how subdivision or zoning growth in your priority list ought to be so that people can know where you're coming from more on that?
I'll tell you about the principles I'll bring to bear. The principles are that we need, growth is going to occur, okay? It's just a matter of whether we're going to guide it or whether it's going to happen to us. So I want to guide growth. I want growth to occur close to the infrastructure in place or planned. In other words, I don't want us to sprawl out throughout the county and then have to build the infrastructure to go out there to service those developments. So urban growth needs to occur close to the existing urban area. That's sort of the basic principle. We also have to take a look at the quality of life we have here and we want to have here on into the future. Will we protect the air and water quality? Will we build strong neighborhoods? And can we involve citizens in their government and make them feel like this is a living community? So, that all can happen with some careful planning. And if we're not careful about it, we're going to end up doing like we've been doing, I think, for the last 15 or 20 years, and that's tending to sprawl throughout this valley. That endangers the water that we depend upon, that we're driving over and so on, the aquifer beneath us, that endangers air quality, that puts us in cars, stuck at intersections, day in and day out. So the principle is that we can guide growth, we can do it sensibly and intelligently, and that's what I would bring to bear if I get the chance.
Yeah, I'd like to respond a little bit to that. In my meetings as I travel throughout the county, it's become very clear to me this county is a very big area. We have a fairly wide dispersity of population. I hear Bill Carey telling us that Frenchtown is not going to be allowed to grow. that maybe Seeley Lake isn't going to be allowed to grow. I think that's somewhat preposterous. We've already have communities that stretch from the 9 Mile to Frenchtown to Lolo to Clinton to Seeley Lake. We've got to, those places are going to grow, and they need as much help and control as we can give them. They do need planning. I'm not totally convinced that you can develop one comprehensive plan that are going to help all of these people grow at some uniform plan. I don't think that really takes into account the human element that I've found in my building business, and the human element is that it is unpredictable.
Could I just respond? I hope nobody else here heard me say that Frenchtown and Seeley Lake and other communities are not going to grow. What I said was, growth is inevitable. Growth is going to happen. The question is are we going to guide it? Are we going to sensibly plan for it? Or will growth just occur willy-nilly and eventually destroy the lifestyle that we treasure here? It's not about stopping growth. You might as well try and stop the tide or the full moon or what have you. Growth is happening and will happen. People want to live in a beautiful place like this. It's a matter of intelligently planning for it and bringing people into the process who live in the communities that will grow. That's what I tried to say.
A big part of all of this planning, zoning, land use, the whole business is how the county commissioners allocate for and use their staff. Does Missoula County have an adequate planning department at the moment, or does it need more people, more money, less people, less money, more teeth, less teeth?
From what I've seen working through the planning department, I don't think the planning staff probably has enough people to cover all of the areas of Missoula County that need to be covered in approximately the same time frame if we're going to develop and refine a good community county plan. The other problem I do see is there is a conflict or a difference of issues between county and city as to how this plan is going to be used and how the resources of the staff are going to be used.
Are you talking the growth management plan?
I'm talking about the Office of Planning and Grants, basically. They are trying to serve basically two masters. One is the city that concentrates basically in the city proper, and then they're also at the same time they're trying to serve the county. That spreads from the 9 Mile all the way up to Seeley Lake. And ideally, I would like to see planners at least associated with each one of those areas to help those people develop their plans. But that,
those rural areas?
Those rural areas, which are a key to the development of any plan, is how do we help the rural areas integrate into our Missoula urban plan. That is also one of the fears in the Missoula rural areas, is that the urban plan doesn't overtake in the rural areas.
Does that imply you would like to see a separation back to specific county and city?
No, it doesn't
offices?
apply that. I think we need to find ways to work together, and there's a very definite way that the city and county very definitely need to cooperate on planning. Each of us needs to understand the basic concerns of the other, though, and the fact that as county commissioners that we have a much wider area, populace, and land use than the city does to try to manage and assist.
It is a concern. I understand that approximately 80% of Missoula County's population lives in or close to the urban area. And so it is a concern that we do have to be very considerate of, and that's that people in the outlying communities are listened to, that we hear their voices, and that we act in a very responsible fashion to their needs, which are obviously different than some of the urban needs. I've talked to a number of people in the planning department. Nobody's said to me that we're desperately short of staff. More planners would cost more money. But again, I think in all fairness, this is one of those things where you'd have to be on the job for a while to really get a good sense of where we may be short-staffed, where we may be able to switch some people around.
I'm going to jump on you for that one. We're putting you into this job and handing you the keys to our $40 million county car. we'd appreciate it if you had a driver's license before you get behind the wheel.
Well, that's fine, but I think it's not really responsible to say you've got all the answers before you actually are on the job. I mean, I think what we're talking about is what kinds of principles do you bring to bear? What are your priorities? You'll make decisions as you learn what the problems are. In the legislature, I served 2 terms in the legislature, and you need to be in Helena for a while before you understand what's really going on. You don't walk in there, at least I didn't walk in to my first session in the legislature knowing all the answers. I think the important thing is to be able to ask the right questions, at least initially.
But at your initial assumption, the planning staff does not need extra resources?
I'm just saying that I've talked to a number of them, and they've never ever mentioned that they're desperately short of staff. And I would assume that if you got down to it, most people would say, well, sure, I could use some extra help, yeah. But again, it's a balancing thing where you need to balance the resources you have with the job that you need to do.
You have said you think they do need some extra help. I keep hearing the thing that we need is comprehensive plan that has got to take in the entire county or the majority of it if we're going to develop a unified plan. I guess I don't see how you're going to do that with the staff that we have. I don't know that I'm totally favorable at actually adding more staff, but I don't know whether Bill's sit in on some of the meetings that I have with Cindy Cletty and seen her kind of symbolically pull her hair out from the different directions and the things that she's being asked to do. And I'm wondering if one of the reasons that we don't have a written comprehensive plan right now is that they haven't physically had time to get around to do it. I do like Bill's comment, the one that county commissioners, you're not hiring some kind of high-priced CEO. What we're looking at is a county resident that will represent the average citizen in this county. And I think it's as much importance to know as to who we are, where we've come, and what we've done, and how we're going to represent the citizens in this county.
Any other issues that you've been hearing people wanting to be addressed in that topic?
Well, I think people are always concerned about taxes, and again, it's a matter of having to make the most efficient use of the resources you have. I know that's real easy to say, but I mean that's one of the important things about holding public office is that you are spending taxpayers' money. You're working for everybody who lives in this county, and so you have a profound obligation to be as resourceful and efficient as you can be. And again, that's kind of an attitude I think that we need to bring to bear about government, and we need to make sure that we don't have all the answers before we've asked all the right questions.
We were going to get to taxes in a minute, but let's just jump right in. This election is going to see 3 permissive levies put on the ballot. I'm not sure if permissive is the right word, but 3 levies, special requests for specific funding priorities. The current commissioners have said that's the only way that they can cut loose money to respond to citizens' needs. Do you gentlemen support or oppose any or all of those levies?
Well, I think the levies are all good and the money is all needed. And I support the levies from the standpoint that it will establish the citizen priorities of where the money needs to be spent. After sitting through some of the budgets, I'm not totally sure that the current budget crisis, that there isn't enough money in the budget to fund some of the things that, some of the programs that are being asked for extra funding. I believe that there's money in the budget if the county would able to deal with some of their land and real estate problems, that they could free up some money to satisfy a number of the levy issues that are coming up.
I believe all 3 commissioners supported putting those mill levies on the ballot, and I would have voted with them. I believe the commissioners have worked long and hard to find funds to do what they know the county needs to do, particularly with regard to aging services and parks and roads. So right now, I believe that this is the only course available. I mean, I did sit in on some of those budget hearings as well, and we have a very capable group of people working for county government. I believe we have very, very capable county commissioners, and I think they basically looked at every dime and nickel in the county budget and did what they could to fund necessary services and realized that, well, they were just going to have to put some things on the balance. So I would have voted with them on this, and I strongly support the mill levies. I used to work for aging services. I've been to people's homes delivering meals. I know the need. And so with this mill, with the aging services mill request, we'll be able to continue to meet the need to help homebound seniors, for example. You take a look at our parks. We need those parks not only for the obvious recreational values, but if we're trying to attract businesses to this community, part of having a livable community is to have a viable park system. So I think it makes sense for recreational needs and for economic development. And then with the roads, of course, the county residents will be voting on the roads, but apparently there's just no other way to maintain county roads without the mill levy. So I'm going to go with the commissioners on this one.
We'll leave the roads aside for a minute, but both aging and parks have already allotted earmarked millage in the county budget system that the citizens have said, we want up to this amount spent in these areas, and the commissioners, in their wisdom, have decided not to spend it there. That most of that money, according to the three commissioners, has been used up by the law enforcement and court systems, and they've chewed into the areas the citizens said should be spent on parks and aging. And now they're turning to the citizens and saying, come up with a new area that we can earmark for parks and aging. Is that still a viable way, or should they have cut back into law enforcement and justice?
No, I think they made the right choice. I mean, they're well aware of the inability with existing county revenues to fund some of these programs and services. And again, it's a balancing act. I mean, you can't do everything you want to do any more than you can do with your own budget at home. And tough choices are made every day. And we'll see if the people want to turn out and support these levies. I mean, I hope we get 40% of the voters to turn out, and I hope the majority, of course, support the levies. But this is a good way of seeing, if it's valuable enough to people for them to turn out and vote for it.
Yeah, Bill, I don't think you've sat in enough budget meetings to really understand where some of the budget problems that the county has right now. I do support the levy issues. It's important that aging service and parks levies be voted on so that the commissioners have absolutely no qualms whatsoever that the citizens want those funds dedicated for those purposes. I have seen evidence that the city, the commissioners have taken funds from several of the department heads to cover some of their expenses in developing some of their property. The properties that they've got right now are, of course, the county shops, where the commissioners have borrowed money to build the county shops. And part of that interest money in that has been taken from some of the other department heads to pay for this for this funding need. They've also borrowed money on the Reserve Street to help fund part of the short-term costs for the Reserve Street. And this money, by agreement with the department's heads, that was supposed to be a 1 or 2 year thing, is now going on for 3 years, is being borrowed from other departments. Now we find that the jail is about $1 million in the red. And part of making that jail fund balance out will rest on selling some land. So the county has monies in its funds that is being used for interest payments and for loan payments on developing some of the projects that they don't have another resource of money from. So they're taking money from one pocket and putting it into another.
I don't necessarily see that that's a problem. I mean, that happens every day in most people's business affairs. And I mean, it's a question of, if you've made some mistakes, then you better not make those same mistakes again, and you better learn something from them so you make better decisions in the future. Some things happen that are beyond the control of county commissioners. But if they've made mistakes, if they've gotten into real estate transactions that they shouldn't have, in hindsight, gotten involved in, well, fine, let's just say, let's deal with it and let's move on. The county, though, has to be, I think, proactive in the sense that in developing the industrial sites around the airport. We have to be proactively out there so that we can present ourselves as a very excellent place for businesses to locate to, relocate, or start up in. To do that, you have to be, in some respects, you have to be entrepreneurial. You have to be able to make some decisions, and you have to be able to move your funds around. And there's that flexibility that's necessary, like anybody in business would do. Again, though, you're spending the taxpayers' money, and you have an even greater obligation to spend that money in the most reasonable way you can. But you don't want to tie your hands and say, no, we're not going to do this because somebody may call us on it's just too risky. I don't think we've reached that level at all with county government. I think you've got some very hard-working, very intelligent county commissioners who've made decisions in what they regard as the best interests of the county, and that's all you can ask.
As far as dealing with the rest of the taxing system that the county has to administer, is that working to your satisfaction, or do they need to adjust their budget in order to provide some tax relief, or adjust the way that they handle taxes in order to take some of the burden off, or are we getting what we were paying for?
I believe we're basically getting what we're paying for, and on the whole, the commissioners are doing a good job. The problems they've got themselves into was developing some of their properties and improving them. And they're having, I believe they're having a difficult time, like any business, when you start to have cash flow problems, that you find out how what resources you start having to cash in on, and you look for ways to maybe recap some of those. I don't believe in the Airport Development Fund. I think some of the development standards that they have at the Airport Development Fund are actually discouraging people, businesses, from investing in that airport land.
Airport Development Fund or Board?
The Airport Development Board. So I think the county needs to maybe adjust some of its development stance to start moving some of that land, because they are using taxpayers' money to fund the shortfall that they didn't get from the government to build and develop that property out there. And I think that's a good question for citizens to ask themselves. Should we be using taxpayers' funds to develop property?
You don't believe in the Airport Development Board? You mean it should be eliminated, or its mission needs to be readjusted, or what?
I believe its mission probably needs to be readjusted, or some of its development goals need to be adjusted.
It's an independent board. How are you going to do that?
You do that by the people that you appoint to the board.
I haven't read the enabling legislation that created the board. I did sit in on a meeting of the board. And again, you've got citizens dedicated to doing what they think's best for the interests of our county, long-range interests, and so on. So I think they're doing a good job, and I think we do have to have, we have to be careful that we don't set our standards so low that we end up regretting some of the land uses that are put in place. I mean, it's a balancing act. You can't afford, if you can't afford the vision, fine, you downsize it a little bit. But you can't afford not to have a vision either. And that's that balancing act that you're always going to be, as a public official, you're always going to have to be applying, what's good for this community, what's good for the long-range interests of the people who live here. I tend to think that if we plan properly out there, we'll attract good businesses, and we'll be better off for it.
That airport project in particular is, an awful lot of that is on the ground. The roads are there. That job's kind of, as far as tinkering with, there's not much more you can do except
other than the fact that we've got to pay the bill for it now.
So, what specifically, you said change some directions?
In order to. I've read some of the development guidelines and things that they've asked a potential owner to install or build out there. And if we're talking about generalizing it, we're talking about an industrial park. And some of the standards that I've seen are probably more appropriate to a Kmart or a Walmart and some of the landscapings and the developments and the fenestrations that you have on the buildings in the park. Maybe there's areas that need to be emphasized out there, but there are also areas in that development park that need to be more industrial so that you can attract a good job-paying industry into that area.
You said don't allow the standards to fall so far you regret the decision. What sort of things have you seen in consideration that you think are inadvisable?
Well, I haven't seen anything yet that's inadvisable. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not an expert on the development board. I've sat in on a meeting, I've talked to people involved with some of their work. It seems to me we're doing the right thing out there. So long as what I'm concerned about is that the county will not plan well for the future, and that we will end up stuck at traffic lights as we move through Frenchtown and out into 9 Mile Valley. That we need to sort of plan intelligently. The development authority out there at the airport is one tool to do that. And again, it's like, I think that the emphasis needs to be, let's assume that we can work together on these matters. Don't assume that somebody's got an interest that just can't be reconciled. I mean, if we've got a problem out there with somebody not being able to do business, well, let's talk about it. Let's find out what the impediments are, and maybe we can find some solutions to this. I mean, I tend to assume that people can work things out if they're given a chance.
For example, one of the proposals for purchasing land at the development park involves affordable housing, which currently is not in the development park's zoning and design standards.
Mm-hmm.
Should the county change its standards to be able to sell some of that land for that purpose?
I'd have to look more at it. I wouldn't want to comment on it right now. I just don't know enough about that particular aspect.
From what I've seen, I think it's a good proposal to help them develop, and it's a chance for the county to move a little bit of the land and take some of the pressure off their county budgets. I keep getting asked all the time by my mother-in-law that's trying to maintain her own house and doesn't have a wage that keeps going up every year is what am I going to do to control her taxes? And I guess when I look around and I see the need and I see a way to maybe try to better utilize some of our taxes, that my goal is to try to make sure that we don't tax people any more than we absolutely have to, and that we're wisely using the tax dollars that we have.
You just told me that you thought that more of that land ought to be dedicated more to industrial, less to Walmart kind of commercial things. Do you want heavy-duty industrial right next to affordable housing?
It's a light industrial, and there's enough area in that that you can designate in areas where the light industrial would be appropriate, where it's already developed. At the same time, you can identify the areas where the residential areas could go into. And I think the plan, the general overall plot and plan that they have out there is flexible enough to accomplish that.
I somehow came to mind, I served on the taxation committee. That's one of the committees I served on in the legislature the last time around. And a phrase you hear fairly often is, don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the one behind the tree. And so when you get into taxes, you really do. I mean, as soon as you benefit the homeowner, which is what we tried to do in the last session, things, you help somebody here, somebody over here complains. So it's a very difficult matter, and I know there are no easy solutions to it. Again, it's whether you're listening to people, whether you're trying to be responsive to the needs of the entire community and not beholden to a special interest here or there. I mean, it is a matter of representing all the people.
It's a matter of representing all the people from the entire county too, and I guess that's what I've been stressing, of the need to listen to everybody from the 9 Mile to Lolo to Seeley Lake, and they all have an interest in this county.
Let's move on to what actually was the number 2 issue.
I can't hear you.
The number 2 issue, which we're sort of out of sequence here, is roads and infrastructure in Missoula County. People did not tell us if they're bad and want it fixed, or if it's good and they want you to quit working on it, but what's your call on where this is going? So, Bill.
Well, I did sit in on a meeting about transportation issues last week, or perhaps the week before. Time's going by pretty quickly here. And, one of the things I came away with is that good land use planning is also good transportation planning. The two go hand in hand. Another thing is that the widening of Reserve Street is almost the design capacity that we hoped would last 15 to 20 years. We're going to be there in a year and a half, I think they said. So in a way, you can't build roads fast enough. I talked to some people out in the Frenchtown area when I was out there visiting, and they were concerned about the lack of timely snow removal. So they weren't so sure their county money was being well spent. So I said, well, I'd certainly look into it. But on the other hand, as I said, I support the mill levy, the 5 mills, to make sure that our county roads are sufficiently maintained. Otherwise, it becomes even more costly down the road to fix badly deteriorated roads and bridges. I mean, we have investments in infrastructure, and we've got to maintain those investments. That's the smart thing to do, whether or not you're in private business or you're working for the people.
I think maintaining our roads and trying to improve them are one of the best ways that we can help improve our air quality and our livelihood around here. Especially, again, we tend to get in these arguments discussions where we talk so much about Missoula, and we don't always look about some of the outlying areas. And when you get into the rural areas, so many of those roads are graveled roads, and they are carrying a fair amount of traffic and the dust particulate they put up. I think it's critical that we start to find ways that we can start to pave the road system, and that's one of the places where this county levy would go into effect. In the first year, they've got plans. They'd like to improve roads at Holland Lake and the 9 Mile and Grant Creek and Petty Creek and Blue Mountain Road and Placid Lake Road, and all of those are roads that they would like to start putting hard surfaces on if they can get the money for this mill levy.
One of the things that the county commission has elected to do, I believe on a 2-1 vote, is create a professional road management department that would take over some of the duties of the elected surveyor, which currently manages roads. Is that a good or a bad idea, and why?
You're talking about the Public Works
Yes.
Department? I think it's a good idea. I've read the management team's recommendations, and it strikes me as moving into the 21st century. Again, it's an investment that the county can make that can pay for itself. It's not about personalities for me. It's about principles of good government and just simply moving ahead with what the management team and others think is just the sound, kind of business-like way to go.
Yes, the thing that's bothered me about the Public Works Director is the way that it's been implemented and proposed. And I'm not sure everybody knows that they've already interviewed candidates, and they have they're close to maybe even making a selection, and I'm not sure they even know how they're going to pay for that. What bothers me is the county is every 10 years we go through a review of our county government, and I've never heard a question that the county surveyor has been an area where that ought to be eliminated. I have not yet seen one public meeting that has been put to the public that explains the reasoning behind that discusses where the money is going to come from, how much is it going to require in the coming years. They're making an executive decision to change our county government, and I don't think that's entirely right. I think there ought to have been a public process to explain to the county voters why this is needed or why it isn't, and I haven't seen that process. We go through all kinds of public hearings for subdivisions and ordinances, but I have not seen one public hearing on the question of should we eliminate the county surveyor's office and hire and create a whole other public works department.
Process aside, would you support it or oppose it?
I think I haven't seen enough information on whether it's justified or not, either in the paper or any place else. I've heard rumors about there being conflicts between a commissioner and another office that may have generated some of this, but I haven't really seen a specific information on why it's needed.
the management team's recommendations are available, and I recommend you take a look at it, because I think it's fairly persuasive. But Jerry raises a good point, and one of the reasons I'd like to get this job and go to work for the people is that I think we need to do more educating. We need to involve people more in decisions that are made. That's not to say we're going to put everything out for a vote. I mean, we could get into a real fine mess if we start letting people vote on just about everything that the county commissioners have to make decisions on. But it is important, and I think part of the problem, what I'm hearing on the doors from a lot of people, one way or another, is that, I don't know what the government's doing, and in some cases people tell me, I don't vote, as though it's a kind of a matter of principle. I don't vote. Well, that's a very sad state of affairs, and I think politicians have the responsibility and the opportunity to involve people more in decisions that affect their lives. And public works director, a lot of people just aren't going to care about that. But it is important. And for one thing, you get right down to, are we spending the taxpayers' money as best we can? Can creating a public works department save the taxpayers' money? Will it benefit the county? Those are the kinds of questions that people need to be paying more attention to, and people in political office can help that process move forward.
And there's nothing wrong with the...
It's your impression that the Public Works Office will save money?
That's my impression, yeah, that it's a sound investment in current management, activities. It's just a smart way to do business anymore.
Jerry, go ahead.
I guess I've never seen a new department that doesn't create more of its own, more budget and more overhead, and we got a budget problem as it is right now. And it's nice that the management team can make recommendations, but I don't believe the management team should be making decisions that ought to involve input from the county taxpayers. And maybe that's one problem that I have, is that some people in management and bureaucracy start to make decisions that they think are good for county citizens and voters, and that they don't ask for the input of the county voters. And I don't know that it has to go to a vote, but it certainly needs a public hearing, and the information and where it's going needs to be put out.
Speaking of public votes, where do you gentlemen stand on CI 75, the tax initiative to put all tax increases to public vote?
I'm opposed to it.
I've been debating quite some time as to whether I should oppose it. As a good county commissioner, I think I could control taxes, but I understand the frustration of where many taxpayers come from. And because this is something that is statewide, I favor the vote on CI 175. See what the initiative.
You'd vote for it?
I'd vote for it.
Let's move on to development. The commissioners, we've sort of danced around this a little bit. The commissioners have jumped into a number of projects that they've committed county resources to accomplish. Some of those are sort of locked in. There's a new one sitting on the table right now to purchase the county shop site by the same man who was proposing a Eagle Hardware shopping center there a year ago. There's no information yet what he's proposing now, but he's offering to buy it again. And the county has other lands and properties that it either needs to use, develop, sell, somehow get the best service to the taxpayer on. Mm-hmm. What are your priorities for working in that area?
I believe that the county does need to sell the land, but I think it needs to do it in a prudent fashion. It needs to make sure that the offers that they accept are reasonable and to the benefit of the county. I think it's hard to comment on specific offers when you don't know all of the specific details of what the offer may be.
Let me put the question this way. Is this a process and activity that the county ought to get out of and leave that to the private professionals, or is it something the county needs to maintain a hand in? Should it be looking for new areas that it can exert some sort of development control?
Well, I guess my feeling is I think the county ought to take care of what it's got and then basically try to get out of the land development. I think they've got into that as a side issue for some things that they were trying to create, and it's unfortunate that they've got three of them at the same time that all end up competing with each other. I guess I personally, I don't believe that the county should be involved in real estate.
Well, it's an interesting question. I think cities and counties and state governments and federal governments are involved in real estate. It is a question, though, of whether or not their involvement serves the public interest. And it's also a question of, I would be looking to form partnerships with people who want to do business here in Missoula. They have to, in my view at least, local government has to have a kind of entrepreneurial streak to it somehow. That doesn't mean that we're going to venture into, risky kinds of projects, but we have an obligation to get the biggest bang for the taxpayer's buck. And you don't do that by kind of, just sitting back and not getting involved in things that could benefit the local economy. So I agree with Jerry. If you've got real estate, then you need to get a reasonable price for it, and you need to act prudently on behalf of the people you work for. And we shouldn't be out there trying to do what the private sector does best. But we can be looking for ways to form partnerships so that everybody benefits.
Let me give you a hypothetical. We are coming up on the bicentennial of the Lewis and Clark expedition, and the Missoula County area holds some of the best, most undisturbed, most available landmarks of that trek, and quite likely will become a very popular focus of an awful lot of people coming out to this area to somehow re-experience the whole Lewis and Clark phenomenon. Should the county be looking for ways that it might capitalize on some of the state and federal efforts to promote Lewis and Clark landmarks by perhaps getting involved in scenic byways, interpretive centers, other things that could possibly involve land purchase and development?
You bet. That's part of making the most of your resources. It probably could be a very wonderful cottage industry to do all that we can to promote the Lewis and Clark Trail and that part of our country's history. It's one of the special things about this place. So yeah, we need to get involved as best we can in helping people come here and learn more about American history and spend some money in the local economy.
Including county tax money?
Well, including county tax money if it's a sound investment, sure.
And I guess I would say that I think the county ought to find some professionals that are experienced in developing that type of thing and form a partnership with them and minimize the county investment as much as they can.
But you would allow some investment?
Investment of time. I guess you give me a specific and I'll give you a specific investment. I don't think I can generalize on any of that. If we have land that needs to be developed for interpretive centers, I think the county ought to join and partner with somebody that's experienced in doing some of that. And that's the way you partnership and work with something. And I don't necessarily think that the county ought to start developing another project team to develop that in itself. Let's use the private sector where the experience is available to do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a variety of other things on my list, but we've been going at this for about an hour, and you've all been very patient. I'd like to now open it up if there are any questions from the audience. And again, please remember, we'd like to keep this, what do you think about end of sentence, and let them respond, or how would you vote on end of sentence? Front here.
We're hearing from the outlying areas that it's very difficult to get to a Wednesday 1:30 commissioner meeting. If elected, would you switch the meeting to an evening meeting? Some people in the outlying area and people in the inland area would attend.
I would.
On a regular basis, I wouldn't. On a periodic basis, I think it would be important, but I think there are other issues that make the day meeting more advantageous for the county.
And I would switch it because I think that we need to do everything possible to involve more people in their government, and I think that would help.
Am I recognized?
Go ahead.
I was interested in this industrial park development out by the airport. What incentives, this is for either one of you, what incentives are you throwing out to attract people into this area? Or do you know?
I guess neither one of us, I'm sure, is involved in the day-to-day activities of that industrial park board. It is basically acting as an independent park board. So I have no personal knowledge of what incentives they might be throwing out. All I've looked at is the development standards that they've sent out to realtors that are supposed to entice people to come in.
Let me put the question this way. If you were county commissioner, what, if any, of your energies would you dedicate to advancing the development of that park?
I would devote as much time as it needed. I think it's very critical that we find ways.
What would you do? Would you go find buyers? Would you arrange tax financing? Would you, what?
I think I would do whatever it takes to try to move the land and entice people to come into this
What would you
area.
not do? Doing whatever it takes doesn't tell me
Doesn't.
anything that you're doing.
Well, the reason I asked the question is that in the area that I came from about 10 years ago, most of the airports in that area paid for themselves. Through the development of industrial parks around the individual airports. And I would say that in the airport itself, in order to be completely self-sustaining, the development of the industrial park is crucial. I think it has to happen, or the airport will never be a money-making proposition. It should take care of itself. Maybe it is now, I don't know.
Well, you understand they're separate entities. The airport
Yes.
development park has nothing to do with the airport at all
That's
right
true,
now.
but their two will tie into one another
Yes.
because corporate, the flight departments will move in. Right now, there's very few big corporate flight departments out
I
there.
mean, we need to get these guys to respond, sir. What specifically would you feel comfortable spending your time on to make that happen?
I would be willing to, I guess, go any place and meet with any potential buyers, developers that would be interested in coming to this area. I think the other thing that I can do is make sure that we have a good, friendly business environment that would entice people to come in and try to find ways to avoid getting into minor disputes and not really so minor, such as the Eagle Hardware Company had, where we started to argue over basically minor development issues.
Do we have a good business environment now?
I don't think the perception is out there that we have a totally friendly business environment.
What's the first thing you change?
Making the process simpler and clearer and easier to go through.
What part of the process would you start with?
You start with probably the planning and the development review process.
But is there too much paperwork, not enough staff, too many costs? Where?
I think right now in the past that the development standards have not been specific enough so that developers really could plan for something up front and know that once they planned something that they had a reasonably good chance that it was going to be approved.
Bill?
And that's what I was saying earlier. I mean, the builders and realtors need predictability, and they also need to know that the local government is a partner. I mean, we can't thrive without thriving businesses. Businesses drive the economy. If we don't do what we can to help businesses and the people who work in those businesses, do well, then the community doesn't do well. So it's not us versus them. I mean, we are in this together.
So what are you bringing to the table as far as
Well, I'm
partnership?
first of all, I'm bringing the willingness to sit down and listen and talk to the business people, the business interests. I mean, I think it's a matter of educating ourselves about their troubles and problems that they have. So I'm a very willing and active listener.
But they're going to say, what can you do for me?
Well, first off, I can understand the position, the problems they have. And that's I'm talking about the very basic sort of beginning. You know, you need to understand the person's problems before you can help solve them. And then, once you understand them, I mean, who knows? I mean, you can, maybe you can get the exchange or the what is it, the off-ramps, on-ramps out there at the airport. Maybe you can get the federal government to do what they did, kick in to have access to your industrial center, if that's a problem. If transportation's a problem, then you go to work on transportation. If affordable
Does
housing...
going to work on transportation involve committing county funds or other resources to...
It certainly could. I mean, whether or not you have to repair a bridge or widen a bridge or widen a road. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that the county's funds will be involved in helping business do better.
And that's something you think is something you would commit to?
Well, sure. I mean, it's again, I mean, this is about partnerships. It's about working together. It's about your interest and my interest and her interest and his interest can be, to some extent, brought together, and we can work together. We can't make everybody happy and get everything they want, but most people don't want. You know, they'd be uncomfortable getting it all, because that's going to mean that somebody else probably didn't get anything. So again, you're in a public position, balancing the various interests involved, and you try your best to listen to people and to work with them so that they realize that what you can do is the best you can do, and you're willing to do more if you can. I mean, it's just a matter of saying, look, the door is open, let's talk, you know, let's work together. I mean, that's a fundamental attitude.
Let me see if I can restate your two positions to ways you find acceptable. If I understand Mr. Ballas correctly, you would prefer that the county back down, if not stop, future land development activities, and if such activities are simply too important to pass up, you would prefer the county keep its contribution to time and staff assistance and not taxpayer actual dollar contributions.
I think that's a reasonable statement.
And Mr. Carey, if I understand you correctly, you think the county does need to remain in play for possible development projects, and that could involve commitment of tax dollars, and you would be willing to research those.
Right, we need to be open to possibilities. Never say never. I mean, you have as I said earlier, you have a special obligation because you're working with other people's money, but I don't believe in ruling something out that who knows what may happen 2 or 3 years down the road. Who knows what opportunities may come along. So I want to leave the door open, and I want to make good, sound investments if they appear to be prudent and necessary.
I'd like to interject one last item, or one additional item in that. One of the biggest disincentives we have of bringing business into this community is the tax that we put on business property. And I think we need to, I would lobby for a decrease of the business tax to make it more affordable and attractive for businesses to come in here. I know when I changed to computerization of my drafting machines, and I had to go out and spend $20,000 for all a new computerized system, that the taxes on that new equipment ate up any profits that I gained or incentive for doing that. So I think we need to come up with ways of reducing the tax on business property to entice businesses to come in.
We certainly need to take a look at it, but I must remind you that when you reduce taxes here, you either cut services and programs there or raise somebody else's taxes, you know. We have to take a look at what is going to help business thrive, you know, and bring businesses here and so on. But again, you know, there are lots of things we need to balance, and sometimes, again, if you help somebody over here, guess what? Your taxes over there are going to go up.
In the back.
Yes, there's one area in which there's rather divergent points of view, as I understand it. Mr. Ballas suggests that his support of the initiative in which everybody would vote on all matters of tax and would propose submitting a comprehensive plan to a public referendum. Mr. Carey opposes both of those. I would like to know what underlying principles of government have led you to those points of view.
Well, for me, it's a matter of representative democracy, and having served in the legislature for 2 terms, I can assure you that many of these issues that we face require a great deal of study, a great deal of reflection, lots of talking to and listening to people who are very knowledgeable in a given area. So I believe that we have a pretty sound system wherein we elect people to represent us. Now, that's not to say that we never ever should vote on things, but when you're talking about things as complicated as taxes, you have taxes on the one hand and you have spending on the other. So if we're going to put a popular vote on taxes, well, what are we going to do? Start now voting on where we spend the money? I mean, we need to, I think, do better at representative democracy, pay more attention to who's representing us, and get out there and vote and work for people whose interests that we think we share. Again, I think just as a matter of reality, you basically want a good, hard-working person to be making some of those very technical and tough choices for you, because for whatever reason, you don't generally have the time to be able to do the research yourself. So it's about representative democracy, in my view.
And the very basis of our Constitution that we have in the state gave us the right to pass initiatives and bring things to public votes. And I think that's an indication that people want to get involved in their government. It starts to sound like me, if you're not for an initiative, then the initiative process is not a good thing. If you're for the initiative, then it is a good thing. The Constitution, and we have a good state constitution, establishes the right for private citizens to petition their government.
From my personal point of view, I absolutely don't know how I could ever comprehend all the taxes needed for roads, for this, for schools. Where do I go to school to learn all these things? And how do I evaluate them one against another? And Mr. Bells, I disagree with you that this is an indication that we all want to vote, because if we don't all want to vote, it's something against the initiative process in the Constitution. I don't think those two things are relative. What worries me is,
Ma'am, can you put it in the form of a question,
it?
please?
What?
Can you put it in the form of a question that these two can respond to?
No.
Well, you ended with a question. How does a person do it?
You're certainly entitled to your opinion, and we'll listen to everybody. I've got my opinion too on that particular issue, and that is, I believe we have the right to petition our government.
All right, I'll ask the question. How does the ordinary human being learn about all the taxes, all the relationships, how they feed on one another and work together? And do you really think this populace who doesn't vote very much is going to sit down and learn something that is fundamentally important to our society?
They learned about our Constitution enough to vote on it.
I was in the Constitutional Convention, and we worked for...
Ma'am, we can't do a dialogue, I'm sorry. Would you care to respond?
Well, I would just say that we're talking about two different things, it seems to me. Mr. Bellis is perfectly correct. I mean, we have the right to petition the government. We have the right to put initiatives on the ballot and so on. The question is whether you support a particular initiative. In this case, should we have a vote on all the tax increases that are proposed? And in my view, that's not a very sound thing to do. And I've said because it's so very complicated, and because you're not talking as well about expenditures. I don't want to overdo this, but when you sit in the legislature and you hear bill after bill after bill, and then when they bring you the budget, the state's budget, and you spend 3 or 4 days, hour after hour after hour, listening to how this money is going to be spent and making amendments on, well, let's change this and let's change that. It's not something that boils down, or in my view, should boil down to a straight, up or down. I'm for this tax increase, or I'm against it. So much goes into this. I would say that if people are interested in taxes, they have lots of opportunity to get involved and get out there. Learn where I voted, learn where other people have voted, and if you don't like it, get in there and run for office. If you like it, help that person win the next election. It's really about getting more involved in our democracy. That's kind of the heart of the problem. We need to get more involved and understand these things and make this government system work. If we start voting on all these things up or down, I don't think we end up with a very healthy public life.
You, ma'am.
Case in point here on thinking about taxes and such. What is the responsibility of the builder? What I'm thinking of is the Maloney Ranch. The roads, water, there's no water up there. How is this going to be taken care of here locally?
From what I understand, it's...
Let me repeat that, it was kind of hard to hear. She wants to know how infrastructure such as roads and water are going to be taken care of and she gave the example of the Maloney Ranch development. What the county commissioner candidates think they ought to do about that.
My understanding is the developer's responsibility to install and build all of those.
I'm not familiar with that particular project, but again, you've asked the million-dollar question. In Helena yesterday, there was a lot of talk about impact fees and a lot of talk about how do you arrive at a fair way of assessing the developers, what the developer should pay for and what's the public should pay for. Nobody's got an easy answer to that question. I didn't hear one yesterday. It's something that we're all looking at and trying to find a very sound way to have equity apply. That the developer and the developers that I heard up in Helena yesterday agree, yeah, there are some costs that we should pay. But again, how do you determine what they should pay and what the public should pay for? That's a very, very tough question that we will be dealing with more and more in the future.
Can you two state your general principles regarding impact fees? For example, we have development such as the Maloney Ranch, since that's put forward. Who should pay for the new police officer that the police department needs to now cover that area?
If there's a way to physically determine a direct cost that's associated with that, probably it should be a way of putting on the development process. But also keep in mind that the people that are going to be buying property out there are going to be paying taxes for that too.
And that, again, I mean, this is a tough question, and I don't have an easy solution to it, but I'll tell you a little story about a county commissioner back in eastern Montana when some folks who put in 20-acre ranchettes outside of town came in and said, you know what, we need to have more snow removal out there. And she went to her tax records and looked up looked up in the records and said, folks, you haven't paid enough to put the plow on the tractor, much less get it out there. So, you know, like, we have to take a look. If somebody wants a benefit, then they need to be willing to pay the cost. And there isn't, I haven't seen an easy formula. If somebody's got one, I'd love to see it. But we are going to have to develop some principles because we don't want to discourage development. Development's going to happen, but it's a question of who's going to pay for what and whether or not we're going to reach an equitable formula for development.
What would you do to find that formula?
Well, you know, it's actually not new. There are such things as impact studies. I think there's something out of MSU. I haven't read about it. I haven't read it yet, but I understand there's a fairly new study out taking a look at impacts. But you know, it's one of the reasons it's so tough is because they can be so far-flung. I mean, if developments occur outside, you know, far away from the existing urban area, and you start closing down urban schools and building new schools, I mean, there's all kinds of costs involved. So again, it's another strong argument for good land use planning so that the costs can be more easily determined.
Anything to add?
I don't think I have anything to add to that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Belch, you mentioned that you favor increasing taxes to encourage businesses. I'm wondering if you would support a policy that would hold businesses that get county subsidy accountable by requiring them to pay a living wage to their employees and signing neutrality agreements.
Can you define what a living wage is?
And what was the second part?
Requiring them to sign neutrality agreements for their labor relations.
Neutrality agreement, I'm not sure. Most of us know what
Allowing,
that
well, a clean record with fair labor with the Labor Relations Board, and allowing collective bargaining in the workplace. Living wage as defined by, there are several studies, a job gap study, there's a local study in Missoula, somewhere between $7 and $9 an hour.
Yeah, I've got a proposal by the new party that says a living wage is $7.50 an hour, and then there's a proposal by Kennedy that says a living wage is $8.75 an hour. I don't think anybody has been able to establish and really define what a living wage is. I would hate to tie the county's hands to that would limit their ability to help maybe a small business. I do not think that the living wage proposals as presented right now have been completely developed and thought out and presented. I think they would have an adverse impact to the county as a whole. The city and the county both, neither one of them, they have wage rates that don't, quote, comply with this ideal living wage issue. So I think there's a whole ramifications of economic impact that something like this would propose, and I believe it would be a way to discourage businesses from coming in. You don't discourage businesses by putting additional administrative and arbitrary requirements on them.
I think Jerry's remarks are quite valid. I would certainly argue that that workers have a right to organize. We certainly would want companies with clean records. On the other hand, I mean, who knows? A company could have made some serious mistake some years ago and straightened itself out and be just fine now. In principle, we need to be able to work towards people being able to live here. I mean, but we also don't want to tie, it seems to me, we don't want to tie ourselves to an unreasonable public policy wherein, for example, if you had a startup business that wasn't quite able to pay $7.75 an hour, but in principle they said, well, yeah, you know, we've got a plan to move towards that, well, the counties want to encourage that. So flexibility is real important with this. There are also other ways. I mean, it could well be the county could look into ways of decreasing the cost of living here by doing some more things in affordable housing, for example. I mean, you know, if you can't increase the wage, maybe you can decrease the cost.
It sounds like both of you would not support a living wage rider on any county subsidized employment contract.
No, I couldn't support it as a requirement. What I'm saying is, in principle, yes, let's work towards it. Let's deal with companies that want to move in that direction and show good faith. But, you know, you've got to be flexible on a lot of these things.
And I was looking at, we're looking at helping businesses not just in Missoula proper, and sometimes we keep thinking about businesses in Missoula proper and bringing in a Microsoft company or something like this. What happens if we get something in Frenchtown and we want to help a small restaurant out in Frenchtown develop, or we go up to Sealy Lake and we want to help a small business up there where the wage rates are lower? We can't be tied to some kind of inflexible formula that doesn't give us the ability to work with those people. That's not what partnership and working together is all about.
And unfortunately, since most of the businesses in our county are small businesses, I mean, they're, by the nature of some of those businesses, try as they may, they won't be able to pay people $8 or $9 an hour. I mean, that's just a sad kind of economic reality of life.
Anybody else?
I have a double-barreled question. The first part of it is, suppose that there's an outflow of young families with children from Missoula. Do you consider that a county problem? And if you do consider it a county problem, what do you propose to do about it?
An outflow from
Missoula into...
the urban area into the county.
Yeah, right.
I would consider that a problem. If in fact people are forced to do that, if it's not done just because somebody wants to live in a more rural environment. And again, I think that's what careful planning is about, is that if we have good planning, we can encourage development closer to the urban area. And that makes sense from my point of view for the taxpayer. It makes sense for people who live here. So I think that it gets back to planning, and I think that's where we have the most opportunity to affect the nature of the growth pattern. So we need to be proactive about that.
What particularly would affect a young family's What could you do as a commissioner to affect a young family's choice to stay?
Well, you
in
help,
town?
you provide incentives for people to build affordable housing close to town, or in town. And that's what this planning is all about. You make it attractive for builders and developers to do things close to town.
The number
And-
one incentive proposed was density bonuses, and that was removed from the county growth
Uh-huh.
management plan because of community opposition.
Political pressures, yeah. Well, you're not going to get everything you want, but what I'm saying is you work, you get what you can get in terms of promoting what's best for the long-term interests of the people who live here. And I don't think it's in the long-term interests of the people who live here to allow or de facto encourage sprawl. We can do good, careful planning, and we can bring affordable housing closer to the urban area. I believe that.
Well, we've already got a problem. It isn't a question of where we are. We already have a problem with our young families are moving down to out in the rural areas where they can find ground cheaper and develop a house that's more economical for them. So we have an affordability problem right now. I don't have a solution for that, but I do believe very strongly that drawing a magic circle around Missoula is basically going to create and give us more of a problem of affordability, because it's going to have a tendency to drive up the cost of development and housing in this area. I think we need to find ways of developing land that is out in some of the outlying areas in the Frenchtown and Lolo and Sealy Lake areas. And maybe we don't need sidewalks and curbs and gutters in all of those outlying areas to start with. So maybe there's a way of reducing some of the development costs. Maybe the houses don't have to be quite so big. Maybe they don't always need garages. Maybe there's a way of planning for affordable houses to give a young family a starter house that they can build on.
What, as a commissioner, can you do about that?
You help, I guess you help control the development guidelines, and part of that may be in the development of these subdivision standards and trying to impact the subdivision standards that gives us some flexibility as we go out into the rural areas. But there's already a problem out there. You read it in the Missoulian that young families are decreasing in Missoula. I've got several people that I know in my family that moved down to the Stevensville area because they could not find a decent affordable house in this town. The decent affordable house is a 40-year house that costs $120,000 or $100,000, and they can go down and buy a piece of property that gives them 2 acres down in the Florence area and build a nice house with a garage for that much. You going to stop people from moving out of the county or out of the area?
And if I may, I would just say that I'm one of the last people that would, given the nature of my work and seeing what I see at the food bank with people having to come in after paying the rent and ask for help with food. I mean, year after year, thousands of families find themselves once or twice during the year not having enough money for food, but they've paid the rent. You've got to keep a roof over your head. So there's an obvious affordability problem. And again, the question is what we do about it. I think perhaps the major distinction between Mr. Ballas and myself is about growth management. Can we encourage development, affordable housing development, for example, here closer to town, or are we going to have policies in place that, whether we like it or not, encourage sprawling development? And I think that for a number of reasons, it makes the most sense to say no. We're not talking about a ring around the town. That won't work. We're talking about building places closer to the urban infrastructure. It just makes sense. I mean, I talked to the sheriff the other day. He can no longer send some of his deputies out to the outlying areas to investigate crimes because he can't afford it. Now, what are we going to do? Do we hire more deputies and spend more money on the sheriff's department? Or do we try to bring growth a little closer to town so the deputy can get out there? There are upfront costs. I mean, we've got to make the right thing to do the smart thing to do when it comes to building around here.
Promised the library I'd let them have their room back at 12:30, so that gives us time for one more quick question if we've got it. Go ahead.
I just wanted to ask an accountability question. There's such a difference in the financial reports for the spring, we haven't seen the ones from the fall yet, but I went down and looked at both of them, and there seems to be a real difference between sort of large contributions from builders and not very many small contributions on one side, and a huge pile of very small contributions on the other side. And so I just really want you both to talk about who you'll be accountable to in the county.
Well, I'm going to be accountable to the county citizens. I've received a tremendous amount of support from all kinds of county citizens and our county citizens in this county that are very concerned about the growth and the development of this community. And they've come out and helped me. I hope you don't have a problem with the county citizens supporting people that they believe have roots to this county and this community, and that have lived and grown up and know this community. And that's what the people that are supporting me tell me when they ask to help me.
And as well, I mean, I'm accountable to all the people in the county, whether they voted or not, or whether they gave me money. I mean, we're accountable to everybody. I will say, however, that I've worked with builders in this community, and I know that they care about the quality of their work. I know they care about the future of this county. The word seems to be out there among some of them that I'm anti-growth, that nothing's going to get built if I get elected. Couldn't be further from the truth. The whole idea is to do good building in places that make the most sense for us now and into the future. Realtors, I mean, sometimes, you hear that realtors don't care about this place, they care about selling homes and that's it. Couldn't be further from the truth. I've worked with realtors over the years. I just had one find me a home I could afford in an area I wanted to live in. Well, every day, builders and realtors are doing high quality, very professional work, and they care about this place. I mean, like we all do. So we can't, it's not sort of us versus them. It's about all of us having to live here in a place that's beautiful, that we treasure, and that we want to be able to be good stewards to. I mean, that's what it's about. We want to be able to pass it on and say, here, folks, we left it in good shape, and you do the same.
Ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you all for your participation and your presence here. This is, as best I can, the notes of this interview are going to be published in tomorrow's Missoulian, and I believe this will be broadcast on MCAT, Andy tells me, in about 2 weeks, so that's roughly the week of October, what did we say?
19th.
October 19th, somewhere in that area, so you may want to watch or tell your friends who weren't able to come here to watch for that. Again, Election Day is November 3rd. I'd appreciate it if everybody would get out there for our own standing up for our civic responsibility. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
Good job.
Sure. Opposite.
Very good.
Right.
Thank you, Jim.
Sorry. Well, you're taking a lot of pictures.
Oh, yeah. I've been trying to keep up with all the legislative candidates and haven't really followed anyone else. Chamber of Commerce, Rotary Club, anybody has invited you to other group forums?
Other chambers have
Chambers
one.
having one, the builders and realtors are going to have one.
What's your schedules are for those?
I don't have my schedule book with me, but
Try to catch them if you can.
Okay.
Only for the film we want. Here we have a classic example of an over-exuberant dog. Classic OES, over-exuberant syndrome.
Cody, no. Come on now. Come on, Cody. That is enough now. No more. Drop it. Come on. You can tell I'm having a lot of problems with my dog. And the grass is wet. He's gonna buck. Cody. Oh, yeah. Oh. Okay.
Sit.
Sit.
Good.
Oh.
Good. Good.
Okay.
Now, I take approaches in the squatting down position. Get down to the dog's level and greet him in a friendly manner.
Cody. Okay, Cody. No. No.
Well, obviously that was problematic at best. Perhaps if we get enough people to help out, this problem will surely work.
No.
And then we have the next shot of everybody.
No. Now no more.
Okay, go ahead.
My first example is Cody the dog. Now, what seems to be Cody's problem?
Cody likes to jump up on people and he's very over-exuberant, as you can tell.
Ah, a classic case of over-exuberance syndrome. The problem with over-exuberance syndrome is the dog is threatened by people looming over him. Thus, people must get down to the dog's level in order to greet him in a social manner. For this, we shall enlist the aid of a friendly stranger. Now, if you will approach Cody the dog in a friendly manner, but down low. See, it works.
See, it works.
Okay, go ahead.
It does work! We've discovered a new training method accidentally.
Come on, Cody, let's get all hyped up now. Come on, you can do it.
You know, if you walk him around a little and then sit him down.
Okay, come on.
Let him go up and say hi to Carl. Just let him pet him and wrestle him a little bit. If he thinks he's really weird now, just walking on.
Yeah, there we
Walk him
go.
right up.
Cody! There we go. There we go, yeah. Now don't bite on his shirt. No. Now don't do that. Okay.
Unfortunately, we had every prop in the world.
Okay, Cody, come on.
You're getting better.
He likes that high. The high. Cody, not the...
No!
Maybe I should be the one creeping in.
Go ahead and
Yeah, the remote high probably helps.
Yeah, that's when it gets wild and gets
No!
That's enough. No. Now sit down. Oh. Yeah.
Don't stop him.
Bite me, Cody, come on.
Go get him. Cody, come on, go get him. Thanks. Okay, let's try it again. Come on. Go get him. Yeah, he really would like to do that. Now don't. Okay.
Nice tennis ball here.
Go get him.
Come here, Cody. Okay, that was good.
I know, I was going to say show mine too. They're both pretty toy-oriented. Yeah.
Anytime.
Okay. I've got this problem. He likes to jump and he's over exuberant.
And just shrug your shoulders.
I don't know. I don't know what to do with him.
Okay, good. Okay, go ahead.
Asking the questions? Yeah. So what seems to be the problem with Cody the dog? Ah, a classic example of OES, over-exuberant syndrome.
I'll just make big hand motion.
When the dog has a tendency to jump up on people when greeting them and so forth. The proper way to Correct overexuberance syndrome is to approach the dog at his level, in a low position, thusly.
Great.
All right.
You're very...
Okay, good.
Now, here we have a classical example of OES, the over-aggressive syndrome. A perfectly happy dog when by itself, but when presented with another dog, becomes excessively aggressive. Except that one.
And go ahead.
Now, here we have a classic example of OAS, overly aggressive syndrome. A perfectly happy dog when by itself, but when presented with another dog, becomes excessively aggressive and vicious.
Yeah.
A nice dog when by itself. When presented with another dog, becomes excessively aggressive.
Well, you call them tricks.
Go ahead.
To control this aberrant behavior, one may use various tricks or devices. Here in my bag of tricks, we have many that will help. For instance, if your dog likes chew toys, that is a possibility. Or tennis balls are always a good possibility. And of course, there's the ever popular chew dummy. Noisemakers. And the ever popular wiener.
Good. Go ahead and throw it.
Oh, God.
Let's see what was next.
It doesn't matter the order.
It might be a funny thing, it might be a little overkill, but when he holds up dummy,
Yeah.
you could real slowly pan to him.
Okay. Go ahead and hold up the ball again.
Tennis ball?
Okay, hold on. I gotta get it. Okay.
The dummy?
Okay. Okay, hold on.
Maybe come back at her, move her back, and then let her compose each other again. Needs to get staring at her again. There we go. Look at her once.
Train them too well.
I know.
Are either of these dogs protection trained?
Not really. I mean, yeah, Tara does, but she does a fun, like I said, that kind of attitude towards the ball, that's what they look
What
for.
I'm wondering is if we could get her to...
Good, okay, good. Get some more going.
And shall I walk into the shot now?
Sure, go start throwing stuff around. Try to keep her looking at her if you can. That tension level.
Now here we have the dogs in pre-aggressive posture, much growling, much snarling, and other vicious looking behaviors preparing to be aggressive. But the magic tennis ball will calm them down. And if we give each dog a ball, one for you, one for
I
you.
was afraid of that. Yeah, it was for both of them.
Problem solved.
Yeah, but give him just one and see what happens. Yeah. Aus. Yeah. Aus.
Keep a good grip on it here. I'll have one. I can have one ball between them.
Yeah.
Put her about halfway in between them. Just kind of drop her on the ground and let her kind of bounce about halfway between them.
And let him come back a
Oh,
little bit.
that might be an even better idea.
Yeah.
Drop the tennis ball down and they fight over that.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Problem solved.
Good snarling going there.
Should I toss two more down there and just see what they do?
Yeah,
I'll pull more.
All right, well.
This is good because they're still standing like they were when they were growling.
Yeah.
Hold that right there for a second.
Good.
And if one tennis ball doesn't do the trick, surely a larger quantity should do it. Like an Easter egg hunt.
Like just find a good one.
Yeah. Taste them all.
It actually is funny that it actually
Yeah, it does work.
Yeah.
It's terrible.